Yeah. What you were saying, you couldn't tell?
Yeah, at first I thought it was A because for the day I die, as if he's looking forward to after he dies, and would be assuming that he would go to heaven. And because I've heard from a couple of his other songs that talks about going to heaven, and so I thought that might have been it. And I was really looking at that key phrase right before, for the day I die. But then I also thought maybe it's working too before you get to the day you die. So I couldn't tell if it was after, if it was pre or post.
Right. And what led you, because that's sort of why I put that one in there as the distractor, but what led you to know it was me?
Partly because of the preceding lines, I could tell that he was telling a story of how he accomplished something. And so I knew it wasn't the accident. And I guess I just looked at the other part about spending the money. That's what I thought he had become the rapper. Just knowing who he was, that sort of gave it away.
And then down the bottom where he says, you know, he's this hip hop legend, and so he's thinking, wow, it's like I died for the heaven.
Right.
I've accomplished that.
Right. Yeah. And so what did you all think about this? I mean, what did you need as readers to get anything in this, on these questions correct, or even to know how to eliminate choices? What did you need?
Well, I wouldn't have come up with any of these answers if you hadn't given me an A, B, and C choice. And I was just kind of trying to logic and puzzle them out.
I think for the, to have some kind of prior knowledge and even understanding some of the language. And so I was just thinking about our kids that don't have that academic vocabulary.
Right.
And it's not the prior knowledge, and now we're just saying, here, go read this and
Right.
answer these questions.
Right.
So I read it, but I don't get it.
Right.
That kind of thing. So
Exactly. Yeah. Other voices, how did you feel about being asked to comprehend something like this, especially if you've never heard the song or you've never seen it even written out like this, you've never seen the lyrics to it? How did you feel about being asked to do that?
Not fair.
Say more about
Yeah,
that.
well, Martin knew all about these pink polos and rock and jam, and you know, I thought, hey, he has an unfair advantage here. Both race and gender, I think, is going on here. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have. Those pink polos, that really bothered me. I thought, what are those pink polos?
Yeah, you do start getting frustrated by the text. You're like, what is this? I don't understand this.
Literally, it is pink polos. There were times when it wasn't.
Right, you don't know if it's literal or figurative or what's going on.
Right. Yeah.
Well, but it's also that pink polo shirts are preppy, and this record company, it would have hurt that record company had all their stars. Well, they were wearing that stuff, and then they just made it cool to do it. But,
Right.
But it's just back when they thought pink polos would hurt the rock.
Right. Yeah.
Because Kanye is a preppy dresser, but he does wear pink polos.
And Argyle,
And the vests
Yeah.
and everything.
Like golfing stuff.
Not the typical baggy pants that you would see. Not the typical, really street sort of look. He doesn't have that look, and that's why all his records. I mean, College Dropout, the Graduation, Late Registration. I mean, they were all in a sense. I mean, he went to college for a couple of years. So again, it's not the image of a rapper that you would think. It's very interesting, and just looking at these lyrics. Even for me, I had heard the song so many times and seen the video. That's even more kind of explosive. I don't know if I could go with the video, but just seeing this and knowing that there are words to these songs, and so many kids, I mean, they sing this like whatever. They would have gotten those answers like that. Some kids just would have known every single answer and would have been able to expound more upon what some of this meant. So just getting a sense of that. Good readers also.
Should I just add something quick?
Sure. Go ahead.
You started the example by talking about us all being proficient readers, and I'm sure we all are, given that we're sitting in this university setting.
Yeah.
I think at the individual word level, at least some of us got all of the words really well, but then couldn't put the whole meaning together without having the contextualized knowledge that we needed to understand it. So that was one really interesting reaction for me. And my overall reaction, I thought it was a beautifully written piece, and I loved reading it, even though I didn't totally understand it. So there's all of that kind of going on too. So.
That's
Shakespeare.
Yeah.
It's
Like, what is he talking about?
Well, that's how the kids would think of Shakespeare.
Yeah, we do that to our kids all the time.
Yeah. And then bring us in to say, we don't get it.
But I love your point, Alan, because it just reminds me of kids that go word by word by word, and they don't comprehend the whole, and you wonder how that can be, but it's very easy. I mean, for me, it would be medical textbooks or law books, or when you have no prior knowledge or very little, you can know those words and you can be able to read them very fluently, but you don't get it, you don't understand it. That's a really powerful point. And so for me, I know your work, I put down here towards the bottom, Alan, motivation and engagement, and I'm really interested in your work and John Guthrie's work and this whole thing about what that looks like for kids, because they are motivated and engaged. And it's not for everything. I mean, they're not going to be motivated all the time to read everything you present to them, but in general, they do have this high level, I would say, of internal motivation. But the first 2 points are really critical, that they are able to tap into cultural experiences, traditions as critical sources of prior knowledge. And so it's something like that where the urban sort of hip-hop culture is the prior knowledge that you can tap into and is validated, that becomes just that source of knowledge that makes them feel successful, makes them feel confident, makes them want to be that resilient reader down there that's going to struggle and puzzle and grapple with it and not just give up. And this whole idea, and Regina and I talk a lot about this on the phone, about this idea of making strategic connections across various literacies. So it's not just academic literacy anymore. And if you think that kids are just going to want to read for reading's sake, they're not going to do it. So there has to be some other literacies that you pull in, whether it's through technology, it could be math or science. Dr. Dances talked about his math and this whole thing around reading math problems, and that the words mean something. And he had something, a really interesting example, like the sum of the squares is different from the square of the sum. Like the wording is different, and you need to be able to bring that literacy into reading. Pop culture needs to be there, and kids that are good readers make these kinds of connections. They have the skills to really connect and to build the schema that help them to create those kinds of connections. And that to me leads to being resilient. That again, there's going to be things that you have to present to kids that they're going to struggle with, that they're not going to like. But hopefully they be resilient enough and they have the tools and the strategies to be able to go ahead and work through that reading. So some current research that is moving into that direction. I just put a couple of things here. The book, Promising Practices for Urban Reading Instruction and Teaching African American Learners to Read, are both published by the International Reading Association and are excellent volumes with lots of different chapters, talking all the way from K-12. So it's a really nice spectrum of different just perspectives and different strategies that are useful in the classroom. The perspectives on rescuing urban literacy education there in the far right is more a little bit more academic, but it too has a lot of interesting information. Bob Cooter wrote this book, or edited this book. Sorry, that's a little fuzzy up there. And he drew heavily upon his work with the Dallas district, and so a lot of his work is about how to work with whole entire districts, how to move a district, because we know teachers are influenced by not only what's going on in the classroom as the students, but the principal and the district and the superintendent. All of those layers are there, and so his book is really nice in thinking about some of the broader contextual factors that are important for urban reading. This one is called Perspectives on Rescuing Urban Literacy Education. And it's by Robert Cooper, Jr. Sorry, that's not clear. And I do have my contact information on the back of this, so if you want to know or have these references, I'm happy to send them to you. And then there are some national studies of urban schools, and I'm not even going to go through them, but Ron Edmonds, back in the 70s, did interesting work around effective schools. And so you see down here in 99, some of that was replicated. And what I take away from that is that there are really interesting kinds of things that cut across these schools. So it might be, one of them was leadership, and the principal really being a support for the teachers.